Hello everyone, my name is Cara Ferrante and I'm excited to present to you an overview of the North American Free Trade Agreement, commonly referred to as NAFTA, and its trade effects of the three member countries of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. As outlined on slide 2, the agenda for today's presentation will provide a brief overview of NAFTA, the history of NAFTA including Canada's involvement, the advantages and disadvantages of NAFTA, and will include with the overall impact of NAFTA from Canada's perspective. On slide 3, NAFTA was a trilateral agreement that created a free trade zone among the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It was signed on December 17, 1992 by President George H.W. Bush of the United States, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada, and President Carlos Salinas de Gortari of Mexico. The agreement came into effect on January 1, 1994, and was considered the most ambitious free trade agreement at the time, creating the world's largest free trade area by gross domestic product. On slide 4, there were several economic and political factors throughout the 1980s and early 1990s led to the signing of NAFTA. The concept of North American Free Trade Zone was introduced by U.S. President Ronald Reagan during his 1980 presidential campaign. However, both Canada and Mexico were cautious given the significantly larger size of the U.S. economy and the United States' substantial global power and influence. On slide 5, Canada's involvement in NAFTA began with the signing of the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement in 1987, which came into effect on January 1, 1989. A key political moment in Canadian history was the debate over the Free Trade Agreement, which faced strong opposition from key political parties, namely the Liberal Party and the New Democratic Party, as well as concern from labor unions, industry, and the general public. The Free Trade Agreement became the central issue in Canada's 1988 election, with Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who championed the idea, versus John Turner, who was the Liberal Party leader who promised to cancel the Free Trade Agreement if he was elected. Although the majority of Canadians voted against free trade, votes were split among the Liberal Party and the New Democratic Party, which resulted in the Progressive Conservative Party winning a second majority government. With Prime Minister Brian Mulroney's successful re-election, the Canadian Parliament ratified the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement in December 1988 and became effective on January 1, 1989. On slide 6, following Mexico's debt crisis in 1982, the country implemented a series of trade reforms in the mid-1980s to open its economy and join the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade in 1986. Despite these reforms, international investors remained doubtful about the stability of the Mexican economy, leading President Carlos Salinas to propose a free trade agreement with the United States. For Mexico, the agreement would permanently solidify its open market reforms and boost investor confidence, leading to increased foreign investment and economic growth for Mexico. On slide 7, while Canada did not initially participate in the U.S.-Mexico talks, Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney ultimately decided to join the negotiations to influence the outcome and avoid a bilateral deal between the United States and Mexico that could potentially be harmful to Canadian economic interests. On slide 8, the goal of NAFTA was to encourage economic activity and investment across the United States, Canada, and Mexico with the following key objectives. Elimination of trade barriers. NAFTA aimed to eliminate tariff and other trade restrictions, encouraging the cross-border movement of goods and services. This benefited consumers and business by lowering costs and providing greater access to a variety of products. Promotion of trade and investment. By eliminating trade barriers and providing a stable economic trading environment, NAFTA encouraged significant investment opportunities across the three countries. Protection of intellectual property. NAFTA strengthened the protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights in each country. Protection of environment and labor. To address concerns about businesses relocating to Mexico to exploit weaker environmental regulations and lower wages, NAFTA included side agreements on environmental cooperation and labor cooperation. Trade dispute resolution. NAFTA included a dispute resolution framework that allowed individuals and businesses to sue governments for compensation if they violated international law. Established framework for cooperation. NAFTA included a framework to foster further trade cooperation across the three countries. Most favored nation. NAFTA ensured that each country provided the same benefits to all investors and businesses from all NAFTA countries. Established new business classification system. NAFTA introduced the North American Industry Classification System to facilitate easier comparison of business activity across North America. On slide 11, most economists agree that free trade generally encourages economic growth and provides many positive benefits among trading partners. The key advantages of NAFTA include increased economic growth. NAFTA reduced and eliminated trade barriers, stimulating economic growth. Trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico increased by more than $800 million to $1.1 trillion in 2016. Increased trade and job growth. NAFTA created new jobs and increased exports. For instance, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimated that NAFTA created 5 million jobs in the United States alone. Lower consumer prices. Consumers benefited from more affordable options through lower prices of imported goods. For example, the cost of U.S. imported oil from Mexico declined, leading to lower gas prices and transportation costs. Increased foreign direct investment. NAFTA attracted more foreign direct investment, leading to new employment opportunities and infrastructure investments. Lower costs for government spending. Government procurement contracts became available to businesses in all three countries, increasing competition and lowering costs for government spending. Improved diplomatic relations. NAFTA strengthened diplomatic relations among Canada, the United States, and Mexico. On slide 13, despite its advantages, NAFTA also had some disadvantages. Job losses. Certain industries were negatively impacted, causing worker displacement. For example, the United States lost about 350,000 jobs in the automotive sector between 1994 and 2016, and about 1.3 million Mexican farmers went out of business as they could not compete with low-cost American farm products being imported into Mexico. Lower wages. Businesses adopted strategies to discourage workers from joining unions and used the threat of relocation to Mexico to extract wage concessions from their workforce. Lower working and environmental conditions. Governments face pressure to reduce regulations to remain competitive, leading to unsatisfactory working conditions and environmental exploitation. On slide 14, in summary, NAFTA represented a milestone achievement as a free trade agreement that reshaped North America's economic landscape. Although it had disadvantages such as job displacement and lowering labor and environmental standards, NAFTA generally had a material net beneficial impact on each country. On slide 15, NAFTA has generated economic growth and rising standards of living for the people of all three member countries. One of the key economic impacts of NAFTA has been the development of regional supply chains across North America, with business reorganizing their production plants to the most efficient locations. The North American automotive sector is an example of this highly integrated supply chain network. From the Canadian perspective, Global Affairs Canada said in 2018 that by strengthening the rules and procedures governing trade and investment, NAFTA has proven to be a solid foundation for building Canada's future prosperity. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.